All right, guys, welcome back to another edition, special edition of Lawyered Up. This is the day 2 Travis Scott criminal trial recap, which also has the verdict because they wrapped up today. And without making you guys have to wait through a whole bunch of recap, the verdict was not guilty on all counts. So Mr. Scott is a free man, didn't commit any of the crimes that the AG's office alleged. If you guys have any questions about this case, I'm going to go through the recap for today. If you have any questions about this case or anything else along here, just pop them in the chat. I'll try to answer them. There is some stuff I'm going to try to schedule to have Mr. Scott come on the program maybe later this week or early next week and do a more in-depth dive with some of the stuff that was discussed in the testimony, because I think would be good for you guys as the audience to see kind of what happened behind the scenes on all of this with this case and why this case was brought. And Mr. Scott talked about it a little bit in his testimony, and his lawyer, Mr. Seacat, also talked about it in his closing arguments, but it's something that I'll build a post for it when I get it scheduled, and I'm going to have some homework for you guys to do if you want to join in on that stream. But without further ado, let's start off with day 2. So first off, former Chief James Floyd, could not testify today because he had just had a spinal fusion surgery, right? So he wasn't available for his testimony, so he wasn't called. The first witness was Sheree Hill, who is Travis's ex-wife, and they basically, with her, went back over the main points of when the business was purchased in 2015, what their gross revenue was for a year, which is about $1 million, how the PO system worked, when she said that there was a meeting where the conflict of interest issue was issued, but it was a situation where Travis was at the council meeting while he was on the council and then came home and told her about it. And there wasn't anything that they were told they couldn't do it. Let's see here. What else is in here? In 2022, and then on the cross-examination, Mr. Hall asked some questions and found out that the ownership of the Ace Hardware had been divested when the Sheree and Travis got a divorce in 2022. Sheree said they never consulted a lawyer about whether this was legal or not, to continue to do this work with have the casino purchase things. But she did mention that they didn't just do business with the casino. The hardware store also did some business with the health system for the hospital there. They did some business with childcare and some of the other departments. So it wasn't just the casino. The casino was just the things that the charges were filed under. And that she also testified that, to her reckoning, the amount of monetary business that the hardware store did of all of their business was less than 5% with the nation. So the next witness that was called was Chris Ray, and he's the chairman of the gaming board, the Mvskoke Creek Nation Gaming Board, and he's been the chairman for 9 years. And his testimony was basically, was there ever an issue brought with this? Was there any complaints or anything? And he said no, they'd never had any complaints. They never had any issues. Nobody ever told them that they couldn't do it or anything like that. So that was the finding there. But he did also say on cross-examination by Mr. Hall that the gaming board had not gotten an opinion from the attorney general that it was okay to do. They just hadn't had any complaints, so they continued with what they were doing. Then they took a break, and then when they came back, Mr. Scott took the stand, and he basically outlined all of the previous information and when the business was bought and all those things. But this is the part of the testimony where I'm going to try to do an in-depth with him in another program. because he talks about how in his reckoning that was a politically motivated filing due to some situations. And if you're have been following our coverage for several years, we ran a story a few years ago on former Councilman Lucian Tiger when he was on the council and how he was implicated in a HUD violation. So Travis said in his testimony that situation contributed to the groups on the council trying to get him prosecuted because of what happened with Mr. Tiger. And just to recap, Mr. Tiger never had charges filed on him or anything like that. The AG at the time, who was AG Roger Wiley, who was also the AG that recommended this investigation start on Mr. Scott, he said that there was no wrongdoing in that particular instance. But the video's on our channel, and when I do the other program that's more in depth on that topic, I'm going to put the link to that video in that description for that, and we're going to just talk about that and what happened behind the scenes there, because it wasn't really talked about in Travis's testimony. That was just him explaining his belief that it was a politically motivated prosecution. Let's see here. So through this entire time, according to Travis's testimony too, he was never told he couldn't do it. There wasn't any conflicts or anything. So, in fact, he said that there was a meeting where Attorney General Kevin Dillinger at the time had said that there wasn't a conflict of interest here. And so after his testimony was over, both the attorneys had a little sidebar where they discussed whether they were going to call Mr. Dillinger to the stand to confirm or deny that he had told everyone in this council meeting that there was no conflict of interest. And the reason I had that sidebar is because Mr. Dillinger is now an employee of the district court, right? I think he's an administrative manager or something, but so they would have to waive that conflict of interest that he is working for the court. And ultimately, after they talked about it, they agreed to call Mr. Dillinger to the stand. Mr. Dillinger took the stand, and he said that he didn't really remember that meeting or if that there was a specific waiver, but he said, when the whole time that I was at the AG's office, we all knew that councilmen, nation wasn't supposed to be doing business with councilmen's businesses and things, right? But he couldn't confirm that he issued this thing saying it was okay or not. In fact, he said that Kyle Haskins, who was another person in the Attorney General's office, who is now the National Counsel's legal counsel, that he had issued an opinion saying that it was a conflict of interest. So after his testimony, Mr. Seacat, who is Travis's lawyer, called Second Chief Del Beaver because Mr. Beaver was in that meeting. And so they called him to the stand to testify about what was said in that meeting. And Mr. Beaver clarified that in that particular instance, what had happened was there was a grant that the LNC committee was going to give out to a ceremonial ground or a church or something. And that grant required that group to get bids on the equipment. And because it was in Okemah, they wanted to get a bid from the Ace Hardware, the Park Brothers Ace Hardware that Travis owned. And so they were asking the AG at the time, Kevin Dillinger, if that would be a conflict of interest, to which he said no, as long as Travis isn't voting on whether they get this grant or anything. Travis wasn't on this committee at the time, so it was okay in his opinion. And so that cleared up the misconception there, because that's a little bit different situation than the casino going over and buying the things directly from there. But it is still a matter of money is coming from the tribe, and it's going to the whoever wins that bidding process. And if it is Travis's business, then it would go to Travis's business. Okay. Yesterday we had, well, let me finish my recap here. Where were we? What happens next? After that, both sides rest, and the court began the process for the construction of the jury instructions that would be given to the jury before they go to deliberate. Those jury instructions included verbiage that said, you are able to consider whether these are nominal amounts that were done just like the business that any person would do, right? So the jury was instructed to consider those, I believe it's Title 31, that phrasing that's in there, when they made their decision, right? And as we said with yesterday's recap and today's, that all of the testimony said that these were below the $5,000 limit, and the business was not conducted any other way than it was previously. In fact, there was never any type of evidence presented, or there were no allegations that Travis did any type of quid pro quo with anybody or anything like that to say, hey, do business with my thing and I'm going to help you out. So that wasn't a debated thing for either side, the AG's office or the defense, whether the amounts of the money, right? The difference was that Mr. Hall was saying that under Title 14, there is no provision for that, whereas under Title 31, there is. So when the jury went to deliberate on the case, they were deliberating also whether these were nominal amounts, and that's probably why they were only out for about 45 minutes or so. And then they came back and read the not guilty verdict, because there really wasn't any evidence to show these were not nominal amounts of money that were, there wasn't. One of the things that I thought was interesting in Mr. Seacat's closing argument and throughout the trial that Mr. Seacat reiterated was that, when we're talking about conflict of interest laws, or these laws in particular, the purpose for passing these laws is to not have corruption on the counsel, right? And if you're going to prove that somebody's doing this type of thing, a good thing to show evidence of is that the person is getting something out of it and giving something back to the person that's patronizing them. In other words, for these particular charges, it would be good to show that Travis was voting in some way to help the Okima casino, right? So the scenario would need to be something like Travis goes to the casino GM and he says, hey, listen, if you guys buy stuff from me, from my business here, I will pass this and this legislation to help you guys out, which didn't happen there, and that evidence wasn't presented because this is a relationship that pre-existed Travis even being on the council, right? So that's the basic everything in a nutshell for the trial. Again, if you didn't catch it at the beginning, there's not guilty on all counts. So I guess total exoneration is the word you would probably use for this. And I don't see any questions in the chat there. At 6 o'clock tonight, we're going to have Rebecca Lansbury and Joe Peeler, the co-directors of the documentary Bad Press, which is about the battle for free press at the Mvskoke Creek Nation. And we're going to be recapping with them their year of all of these festivals and everything that's happened with them, the Critics' Choice Awards and everything else. And the documentary team is teaming up with some other independent documentaries to try to get more Oscar recognition, because Bad Press is also on the long list of films that can be considered for an Oscar this year, and they're going to try to get on that short list. So that's going to be at 6. If you want to ask any questions there, tune in. And then also tomorrow, Gary's show is at 10, and he's going to have a phone interview with some boarding school guys to talk about the boarding school issue. So I'll see you guys at 6 o'clock, and thanks for tuning in. Mado, Hadum, Chihichat, Lees.